This is the GRP podcast where we talk about God, religion, and politics, and I'm your host, Hijabi Down Under. Today, I'm going to be demonstrating how the process of evolution is incapable of producing living things. According to mainstream science, all living things, every single species, and every single unique feature within that species was created through the blind and unintelligent process of random mutations and natural selection. Every single new species supposedly came into being through this process. In the last episode, I demonstrated how even if we gave evolution all the time since the beginning of the universe, it would be incapable of producing even an eyebrow for the first time. Today, evolution faces off with a much fiercer opponent, the human retina. The human retina has an extremely precise configuration of literally millions of individual pieces. And I will be demonstrating how blind, undirected processes would never have been able to produce it. The retina is the inner layer of the eyeball. It's the layer that detects the light. So if you were to open up an eyeball, the layer that coats the back of the eye is the retina. The way that you actually see is that the front of the eye focuses the light that comes into your eye onto the retina. This information is then transmitted to your brain. I don't want to get too technical here, but I do want you to appreciate the incredible genius that is your eyesight. This is how you see. Your eye is like a canvas, and it is constantly capturing the world outside, tiny pixel by tiny pixel, and then transmitting all of those tiny pixels of light to your brain, so that your brain can reproduce the image of the outside world somehow to your conscious mind. So take, for example, the screen that you are viewing right now. How do you actually see it? You can imagine that the screen is made up of millions of tiny little points, like the individual knots of a carpet. Imagine each point as a small piece of the puzzle. Each of those tiny little points or puzzle pieces reflects light from its surface, and that light is then captured by your retina. Now, this is a real photograph of the inside of someone's eye who was happy enough to have it on Wikipedia. The retina covers the entire background, that orangey-brown layer underneath the blood vessels, and that yellow circle or disc is the optic nerve. The human retina has about 126 million light receptors. What that means is that your canvas has 126 million points where it can pick up the light. You can think of it as the level of detail with which you see the world. What your eyes are doing here is essentially recreating the world outside on the back of your eye and then sending that image to your brain. Those 126 million photoreceptors send their information through to nerve fibers called ganglion cells. It's estimated that there are between 1.2 to 1.5 million ganglion cells. These ganglion cells you can think of as the wires that are transmitting the electrical signals from the retina to your brain. Now, all of that is pretty fascinating on its own, but this is where it gets truly outstanding. Those ganglion cells, over 1 million of them, have to maintain the correct order for you to be able to see. Think about that for a second. If the screen in front of you is made up of 1 million points, and you pick up the light from each of these points, each of those points are like pieces of a puzzle, and if you don't keep them in order, you're not going to see an image. It's going to be all scrambled and you won't have any idea what you're looking at. So you need to be able to know that point 1 came, say, from the top right corner of the screen, point 2 came from right next to it, point 3 next to that again, and so on. So those 1.2 million ganglion cells need to keep their order when they send their signals to your brain, and this is how they do it. This is a schematic of the pattern that ganglion cells make on the back of the eye. The black lines are the paths that the ganglion cells take from the photoreceptors to the optic nerve. You'll notice that because of the unique pattern, the lines don't cross over, which means that you don't confuse the signals from different parts of the eye, so that you can tell. Again, say that point 1 came from the top right corner, and point 300, for example, might come from the middle of the screen, and so on. And all of those ganglion cells collect into the optic nerve with the correct configuration, sending that information back to the brain. There is absolutely no way that evolution produced this for two obvious reasons. Number one, this is absolute genius. You can tell just by looking at this that this is the product of an extremely intelligent mind. And number two, I'm going to show you that it is impossible for random, undirected processes to produce this configuration. Remember that evolution is a blind, undirected, unintelligent process. It doesn't know where it's going. It's not trying to do anything. It doesn't know where it's going. It's a process where random trial and error supposedly produces a new and useful feature, and then that new feature gives that living thing an advantage and allows it to pass on its genes to the next generation. The important point is that it first has to produce a useful feature through some kind of random shuffling. But the entire retina is absolutely useless if the configuration of the ganglion cells is not correct. Until you get the ganglion cells to line up correctly, all you get is a scrambled image. But what does it take to get 1.2 million ganglion cells to follow the right path by random trial and error? Let's ask Sage, my AI bot, to help out with the maths. To keep it simple, let's say there's only 4 possible directions that a ganglion cells can grow in: up, down, right, or left. Now, you can tell looking at the schematic that the directions are actually far more defined than that. So the ones in the top left have to curve down and slightly to the right, and then you need to curve slightly further down, but let's keep it simple. Just 4 directions. What are the odds of trial and error getting the direction for 1.2 million cells correct? If each ganglion cell has a 1 in 4 chance of getting it right, then the odds for 1.2 million cells is 0.25 raised to the 1.2 million. Sage comments, this probability is extremely small, as it involves an incredibly large number of independent events, each with a very low probability of occurrence. In fact, the probability is so close to 0 that it can be considered effectively impossible. So I asked Sage, if each configuration takes 1 second, how long would it take to get the right configuration by trial and error? Sage replied, the number of possible configurations for 1.2 million ganglion cells is 4 raised to the 1.2 million, which is an incredibly large number. If each configuration takes 1 second, the total time it would take to go through all possible configurations would be 4 to the 1.2 million seconds. This number is so large that it's effectively infinite in practical terms. I asked, how many years is that number? Sage replied, the number in 4 raised to the 1.2 million is difficult to calculate exactly, but it is an extremely large number. However, to give you an idea of the scale of this number, consider that the age of the universe is estimated to be around 13.8 billion years. This means that even if we had a computer that could generate and check 1 configuration per nanosecond, 1/billionth of a second, it would still take more than 10 raised to the 200,000 years to go through all possible configurations. To put this in perspective, the number 10 raised to the 200,000 is 1 followed by 200,000 zeros. This is an unfathomably large number, and it's difficult to even comprehend just how big it is. Suffice to say that it's many orders of magnitude larger than the number of particles in the known universe, which is estimated to be around 10 raised to the 80. Okay, so let's recap that. The age of the universe is 13.8 billion years. 13 billion is 13 followed by 9 zeros. If a computer was trying to go through all the possible configurations of the ganglion cells and it took 1/billionth of a second to go through each one, it would take a computer, the number of years it would take the computer to get the right configuration is 1 followed by 200,000 zeros. Years. So it would take more than the entire age of the universe. In fact, several orders of magnitude longer. And we still wouldn't have the right configuration for the ganglion cells. And of course, someone listening to this who has a big head will roll their eyes and be like, oh, of course it didn't happen by random trial and error. Okay, so how did it come across the right orientation? I know that random processes didn't make it, but how did the organism know to put the 1.2 million ganglion cells into the right configuration? It's a dumb question, and you feel dumb listening to this because it's obvious that blind, unintelligent processes didn't do this. So, random, blind processes are incapable of producing the correct configuration for 1.2 million cells, even if it had all the time since the beginning of the universe. But if it wasn't in the right configuration, the entire retina would be useless. In fact, your eye itself would be useless, because if you don't have the right configuration, if you don't know where the light is coming from, you can't form an image. It's all scrambled like a million puzzle pieces in a random order, and you may as well be looking at the white noise of a TV screen, which means you're not really seeing anything. But you, the viewer right now, you can see clearly that blind and unintelligent, undirected processes did not create this. Someone did. Of course it didn't happen by randomly shuffling 1.2 million cells and then by mistake having the right configuration, allowing you to by mistake see. That's ridiculous. You can see that someone designed this. They knew what they were doing. It was planned. And you can see that there's intention behind the placement of every single structure. Someone knew beforehand that placing things in the correct order allows for this to work. Not, as evolution would have it, a blind process putting things together and then after the fact finding it to be useful. That's ridiculous. Right? So according to evolution, evolutionary processes made the retina by mistake and then discovered it was useful. That is truly ridiculous, because it didn't happen. And if that was the only mountain that evolution had to climb for you to be able to see, it would never even be able to scramble up the first rock. But that's not where it stops. There are so many more incredible mechanisms that have to work together to give you the gift of sight. The processing of this image in its color, its shades, depth perception, motion, all of this is captured and translated by your brain with stunning accuracy. And even if it were mathematically possible within the time frame allowed, you can see that it's not the best explanation. The best explanation is the obvious one. This was designed by an intelligent being. And more so because this is technology that is far more advanced than all of humanity's best work.